We are now live. We're live on YouTube. We're live on LinkedIn. Welcome everybody. If anybody paying attention, I'm just going to give it a couple minutes to bring people in. I know I just started. I'm starting a little bit late, but we're going to go into this. There's a lot going on in the government right now, and we just want to kind of discuss what the ATO process is, how the 7 steps are coming into it when you bring in a lot of these AI products, software inside the government. So we're going to kind of go into a little bit more depth so people can understand. And by the way, my name is Chris Akpala. I'm an information systems security officer. Been working in the federal government stage for 5 years. So I talk about a lot about RMF, also the founder of TechWoke. So we're going to just go into a little bit depth on what the ATO process is, how does testing controls getting into it, how does POA&Ms get into it, how does creating documentation get into it. So we're going to just really break down this ATO process. A lot of people don't understand the ATO process. A lot of people don't understand the 7 steps of RMF. A lot of people in the field don't understand the 7 steps of RMF. So we're going to just go into a little depth on what the 7 steps of RMF are, what is the breakdown, and just how we're going to figure this out. So just slowly bringing some people, but I'm going to bring up this PowerPoint and we're going to slowly get into like what are the 7 stages of RMF and kind of break it down. And if anybody's watching right now, if you have any questions, concerns, if you have any questions about being an information system security officer, you have any questions about what's going on in the government, yeah. So just make sure you say something. Oh, we got somebody. Lucky. Thanks, Chris, for setting up. No problem. Most definitely always doing it. So, this is what I do for a career. This is what I talk about. So it's no problem to me. So we're going to go into the 7 steps of RMF and how everything ties to each other. Because I know on the LinkedIn side, I'm always talking about POA&Ms. I'm always talking about testing controls, documentation. I'm always talking about the government. Oh, they just got this AI agency just won $10 billion. $1 billion. When you're getting the software into the government, you have to go through a process. So we're going to kind of break down what that process is so people can understand what the ATO process is, why are information system security officers needed, why are we needed to even do this job. And it's a very in-depth type job. So yeah, so if anybody have any questions throughout, paying attention this time, so I can definitely see what's going on. So we're going to go on 7 steps of RMF risk management framework. So in-depth overview of the documentation, tools, and activities. Also, too, I'm gonna post something. Anybody want to check it out? I'm gonna pin it. So we're gonna go into the 7 steps of RMF, and we're gonna break it down so it'll make it sing. Jonah. Oh, Chris the goat. No, there's only one goat. The only goat we have is the Lord Jesus Christ. God is the goat. Just using me to help get this information out there. But appreciate you. So we're gonna go over these 7 steps now. Okay. So this is the first step before any step happens. You got the prepare step. Before you do anything in the RMF process, you got to prepare. Prepare means you have to gather information, what system is going on, documentation. You got to map out what inheritance what. Because when you're using EMAS, some systems, some system might inherit something. You might be inherit another system. So that's kind of what you do. I'm going to kind of break down what I have in the steps. But the purpose is to establish organizational level readiness and integrate RMF operations. That's the point of the prepare step. So you're going to need some information, but the main thing is you need to prepare everything. You need to get the some artifacts you can give. It's like some documentation, government's docs, inheritance maps, just things. You're gathering information in that prepare step. You're gathering everything that this system would need. So you're preparing. First step of RMF, they're going to prepare, and just make sure everybody has defined roles. Who's the ISSO? Who's the SM? Who's the program manager? Who's the IT people? Who are the people that's doing ACAS scans? Who's the people creating the documentation? Who's building the system? That's what you're going to do in the prepare step. So if anybody asks, that's the prepare step in RMF. So say, for example, OpenAI, they're coming inside the government. you got to prepare for them. So they're gathering who's going to do what for who's doing what for every ounce of what OpenAI is doing. You know, they have different softwares too. So what is in place? So that's kind of an example to help people out. Anybody have any questions on that prepare step? No questions? Okay, so we're going to move on to the next step of the RMF process. So the next step of the RMF process is categorization of an information system. So categorization is what levels are that? Is it a high, medium, low? What levels are they at in the CIA? Which is confidentiality, integrity, availability. Like what levels are they at? Or is it a high? Is all of them high? Is all of them medium or all of them low? That's what you categorize in the system. For people that have questions on what the categorization is for a system, make sure you go check out that FIPS 199 document. It's not a classified document. Anybody can download it from the NIST. Just literally go on Google and type in FIPS 1199. So you're basically categorizing that system using that document, and you're breaking down. It breaks down what is a moderate, what is a medium, what is a low. You're usually doing that with certain personnels within that system. So that's what you're doing. Okay, so FIPS 199 is what you would check out, and that's how you categorize in the system. Did anybody have any questions on that? No questions? Okay, so we're on step 2 of the RMF process. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go step 3 of the RMF process. Sinja, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Yeah, no problem. I just want to break it down with all this stuff going on. People want to understand what RMF is, want to know the 7 steps of RMF. What is RMF? What is it confusing? So I just want to break it down so everybody at real time, so you can see I'm not an AI, I'm not a bot, no nothing. So I'm really know what I'm talking about when it comes to this subject. Okay, so the third step, a lot of people don't know the controls. The controls can be in NIST 853. What you can do is go on Google, type in NIST 853, get the documentation, get that documentation. You can look at some of the controls. What is needed to satisfy each control. So that's what you would do. So you ever get a chance, just look at that documentation. Those are not familiar with the RMF process. So what you're doing is you're going into those controls to see what controls are for that system. So that's kind of what you're doing. You're finding out, okay, do we have AC1? Do we have AC2? Do we have AC3? Do we have these CM controls? You're tailoring each control to a system. Usually you'll do that with your organization to see what controls are specific to that system. A system can be like I said, I'm just going to use examples. OpenAI, Scale AI. You're tailoring all those controls to that system to what makes sense. So that's kind of what selecting the controls do. And we're going to get to the next step of the 7-step RMF process. If anybody have any questions, please let me know. Did anybody have any questions on the select step? If you have any questions, just make sure you write it. I see it. If you have anything, just say it. We can talk about it. So if not, we're going to go to the next step of the RMF process. Okay. So the next step of the RMF process, remember, okay, so we're on the next step. So this step, we already picked our controls. So now we have to implement the security controls. Implementing means we got to make sure we test it to make sure that it's configured right for our system so that control can remain compliant, if that makes sense to everybody. So what you would do is, if you get in so for example, if anybody can do, if you're bored, you want to test it out, just go into NIST 853 controls. I use this example, go to AC2, read what AC2 wants. You got to make that comply. So if they're asking for a process to have privileged users, right? Then you got to create documentation to how to get that privileged users. And then that can make it compliant for that control. So that's all you're doing with the implementation phase. You're making sure that you're implementing it to make sure that it aligns with your system. So that's what the implementation phase means. Yep. And again, like STIGs, things like that can help assess it. Also creating documentation. I forgot to mention like the SSP, access control policies, STIGs, things like that help you with implementation phase to make sure you're properly implementing these controls. Okay, so assess. you're testing the controls to make sure they're applicable to the system. So assess, the assess phase. The purpose is to validate the effectiveness of the control. So for example, like I said, just go to the 853, look at some of the controls. You're trying to make sure that aligns with, make sure those controls align for what it's asking you to do. Some of them can be, I'm asking you have to have a contingency plan. So you got to make sure you have a documentation in place, like the CB controls a contingency plan. So you got to make sure you have a contingency plan in place to make that control compliant. If it's not compliant, it's not if it's not compliant, it's not compliant. And then if it doesn't apply, it's not applicable. So those are the three things you could do when it comes to testing and control. Again, you can create documentation to to assess controls, which is testing controls. So some documentation will help you assess the control. Having STIGs will help you with configuring it. So sometimes when you put that STIGs inside EMAS, it'll automatically make controls compliant because it's configured properly for certain controls. You can and again, you're talking to people to make sure things are compliant, and you're also getting screenshots to help test these controls. So make sure that they're putting things in place. And also ACAS scans or vulnerability scans in general are help to use remediate a lot of these controls to properly assess them. So does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. We got somebody say appreciate the explanation and examples. Yeah, no problem. I've been doing this for a while, so like when it comes to doing this, I understand what it comes to it, and it's a long process. So does anybody have any questions on this assess phase? The assess security controls phase? Does anybody have any questions, concerns, or just wanted to figure out this particular portion of it? How often should the system security be monitored? Continuously. No matter how long, you got to continuously monitor a system. So no matter what, you're constantly monitoring a system. You're constantly creating documentation. You're constantly testing controls. You're constantly doing this. You're constantly doing. It's like when you get an ATO, a lot of people like to stop and like, okay. And for those that don't know, an ATO is authority to operate. A lot of people like, okay, we got the ATO, so we good. But you got to constantly check these things because the system can mess up over that period of time. So Shade, thank you. Great question. Okay, 6 is authorized. So authorized is when the system is authorized to run within that government environment or federal environment or things like that. So that's the main thing with this authorized phase. So the AO determines whether the risk is accepted for an ATO. So some of the key artifacts that you need to do an ATO is a risk assessment report, a POA&Ms. You need make sure all your POA&Ms in place. You need to create a package, an ATO package. You don't need a letter. You usually use it. You usually have like ACAS scans too of your most recent ACAS scans. You usually send up your tested controls so they can evaluate them. You're building up a package so you can send that to the AO, to the SCAR, so the SCAR can see it, and then after the SCAR sees it, then the AO approves it. So that's kind of what you need in the authorized phase. You're building a package. Say, for example, for people that may not understand, sometimes you might get an ATO for 3 years, right? Get 3-year ATO. So you're going to constantly, continuously monitor that system for 3 years. Say it's getting closer and closer to that ATO. You're testing controls. You're doing POA&Ms. You're doing STIGs. Once you've done all that stuff, you're building up that package to send it to the AO so that the AO can see that and then send it and then make sure they get you a longer ATO. So that's what you're doing. You're building that up so you can send that package to the AO. And yeah, so that's kind of pretty much on you. The people involved in that process is the ISSO, ISM, SCA, AO. That's kind of everybody that's built in that process. Does that help everybody? Does anybody have any questions on that? Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any questions on the authorized phase of the 7 steps of RMF? And those that don't know, Chris Hockpile of the RMF Academy. So make sure you have any questions. try to make sure we answer as many as you can. So, hey, if you got any questions before I move on to the last slide, okay? Okay, no questions? Okay. So the last step, I think Shade brought up earlier. She said monitor. She said, how often should you be monitoring? So the last step of the RMF process is called the monitor phase. So you monitor security. You're constantly continuous monitoring. Actually, you're constantly monitoring these controls on a constant basis. You're monitoring the documentation. You're monitoring the POA&Ms. We're constantly monitoring the scan reports, the monthly scans, vulnerability patching, audit reviews, everything. I kind of like everything Bully pointed out so I can kind of talk from it. You're monitoring everything, testing controls. You're doing on that on a constant basis. So that's the continuous monitoring place. You're constantly doing work because if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have no work to do. You're constantly, because things pop up. There's vulnerabilities comes up. There's stigs that need to be fixed or patched. There's things that need to be fixed. So constantly you're going to be monitoring the entire process over and over again. Can the documentation created in the preparation phase be reused during the authorization step? Yeah, so the documentation is constantly being revamped. It's not a one and done thing. In the continuous monitoring phase, we're constantly on a constant basis creating documentation. So you're going to constantly update them over time. The documentation you started with is not the documentation you finish with. So you're going to constantly do it on that's a good question. So yeah, you're going to constantly do documentation throughout the process of a system until you take it down or sunset. What they say in cybersecurity, sunset a system. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this explanation of the 7 steps of RMF. I'm going to say a little spill. Check out RMF Academy too. I have an ISSO course. So if you want to check out that, just go on rmfacademy.io or just click the link on my bio and click to RMF Academy. I have a POA&M course and I have an ISSO course that breaks everything down so the novice can understand how to do the job. So okay, so for the how quickly can you get into an ISO role? So when you're doing the ISO role, I will say it's factors. I'm gonna give you two different scenarios. For example, if you're not in the government, you don't have a clearance, you don't have a security plus, it can take years just to get into the government and get a clearance. So it can take a long time in that scenario, probably a long time, especially if you get sponsored for a clearance. If you already do a role like IT or you in the federal government, like you're doing some type of work in the federal government, like an IT, or maybe you have a clearance, you have a security plus, you have everything in place. It can be a little bit shorter if you can learn what you need to know. If you can learn POA&Ms, if you can learn testing controls, if you can learn the process, it can slowly expedite you a little bit faster. But it can take some time. When I first got a role, it took me almost 6 months to a year to get a job. So there's no job guarantee. You just got to put in the work, make sure your resume good, make sure you do the proper training. And whenever the role comes, it comes. But it's always good to be prepared. I hope that answers your question astronomically. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Yeah, I mean you can in the RMF Academy. I have all these templates in the ISO course. So if you want to check it out there, you can, or you can kind of figure it out on your own. Meaning, like you can go get the ISO book and try to test the controls. But the only difference is I know what they're looking for. I know what they need to know. So you can kind of test it on your own, or you can just check out RMF Academy, Evan, and it'll break down everything for you from the beginning of what RMF was to the end and what you need to know during the job. And since I do the job, it helps it out a little bit better. But you can definitely try to do this on your own if you want to. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions? Any questions about being an ISO, cybersecurity, any jobs, like any questions about that? Anybody have any questions? I'm gonna give you a couple more minutes. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any more questions? About to come offline. Just trying to give a quick understanding what RMF is. With all these systems coming in the government, they gotta need people to do the job. So I just want to explain what it is. If not, remember everybody, just check out rmfacademy.io and it's gonna break down what you need in the RMF from creating POA&Ms to doing the whole job. So make sure you check out the website. If anybody doesn't have any questions, I can get off. But I hope this helped. I'm gonna give it 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, if anybody have any questions, man, I'll definitely go do these lives every now and then. So just make sure you check it out. Make sure you understand what the job is, and I hope this helped for everybody. Peace out, everybody. Thank you.